Hey everybody, welcome to this awesome session. Again, for those of you just joining us, thank you for your patience this morning. This is Comprehensive Career and Leadership Strategies to Carry the Competency Torch. And your presenter today is Adele Dantzler. Adele has over 20 years in training as a federal employee. She's used her master's level knowledge in instructional design to create innovative and customized learning solutions to develop leadership talent at the high potential manager and senior executive levels for 4 federal agencies and develop GS-15 and senior executive candidate curriculums. Adele has successfully facilitated training to hundreds of career management and leadership development topics. In addition, she is a certified inside-out coaching and crucial conversations presenter, federal job search trainer, career coach, and is a certified federal job search trainer, career coach, certified to facilitate CCL 360 feedback, EQI 2.0, MBTI, and FIRO-B. Want to remind everybody you'll be able to interact with Adele throughout this session, and I know for a fact she's going to ask you some questions. So in order to do that, you can do a couple of different things. First, you can hit the chat button that is in the Zoom. You can chat with us in FeedLoop, or you can hit the Q&A button, and I will let Adele know your questions. So without further ado, I present Adele.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much. And welcome. Good morning. Normally at this time, everybody's getting their bags ready and they're getting ready to catch their flights out. But because you're home, I know that you're not rushing to do that. There's not going to be a lot of bags at the back of the conference room. So we have the next 50 something, actually 40 something minutes to discuss comprehensive career and leadership development strategies. I also know that there's not a really good buffet that Training Officers Consortium always does around on the last day either. So, but if you want to go ahead and make your own buffet at home, you're more than welcome. So I don't need to explain who I am and my expertise in this area. But what's happened is I did leave the government a couple of years ago after doing a lot of work in leadership development, high potential manager training, supervisory training. And when I left, I did a lot of mentoring for federal employees. And when I left, a lot of them kept calling me and I'm like, I can't really do that right now. So there's a lot of questions regarding how to set up leadership curriculums. And so what I decided to do was to put all that together and in a way that people can understand, how to put together a curriculum, how to look at leadership development strategies. And some of the folks that have already talked, such as Management Concepts and Grad School USA, they did such a great job. And I'm gonna touch on a few of the things that they mentioned as well. So let's see. Well, I love the theme about carrying the competency torch. We missed the Olympics last year, but when you think about the Olympics, think about that whole thing of they're lighting a torch and you're carrying that torch through whatever, terrain, wherever you had to go in order to get it to that point where it's lit for the entire amount of the games. So think about that in terms of your career. You're lighting that. And I love the fact you're lighting the torch, that torch of wisdom, that torch of knowledge and skills and abilities, and then you're carrying that flame throughout your career. So let's talk about what are some things to do to light the torch. So I'm gonna have to put my peepers on. So in order to light the torch, let's take a look at our approach to these comprehensive leadership and career development strategies. So today what I'm gonna do is we're going to talk about competencies because that's one of the best ways to light the torch. And we're going to talk about what makes up a competency. And I know there's a lot of definitions, but we'll look at something just for working purposes. What we're also going to do is we're going to take a look at developmental strategies, as well as the optimal learning mix of those developmental strategies. Then we'll take a look at one particular area in terms of leading change, which is so apropos to what's going on in this last year. And then next, we'll figure out how we can, arrange those strategies, those developmental strategies for leading change to get that best optimal learning mix. And then, of course, can we carry the flame? How can we make sure that this is going to stick, that this is something that's going to work? And then, of course, I'm going to give you some leading change resources. And you see there's something in back of me as well. So to get everybody involved, to get everybody just thinking about it, here's our first poll question. So our first poll question is, what is not a competency? So what you could do is put in the chat. I know this is not written the way that we should be writing poll questions, but what is not a competency? So is it A, what is not a competency, a concept for performance motivation, the ability to do something successfully or efficiently, a logical sequence list of training or coaching, mentoring, and on-the-job of developmental projects, or a combination of practical and theoretical knowledge, cognitive skills, or even psychomotor skills, behavior, and values. So what do we got there in the poll?
Well, folks are still typing.
They're still typing. I love that background, Cheryl. It seems like you've done something different every day.
That's Williamsburg. I was told it had to be Williamsburg.
It looks lovely. It is so great.
So I want to tell everybody there's a big hint on the screen as to what is a competency. So that should help you narrow things down. So what do you guys think? What is not a competency? So folks are saying D.
Okay.
Gary, are you sure that's not a competency?
I know this is a trick question. It's obviously written the way that we shouldn't be writing poll questions, but it's just something to get you thinking. All right, that's enough. I guess I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A at the end. So I will go ahead and let you know. The answer is C. So all the other things could be considered a competency. So the term competency, it first appeared in an article in 1959 by Robert W. White. And basically, if you look in Wikipedia, it basically says it's a concept for performance motivation. And the meaning, though, has changed over the past years, but a competency can be developed by C, which is a logical sequence list of training, coaching, mentoring, and on-the-job developmental projects. So a competency also, it could be when I do a lot of career coaching and federal resume writing. And it actually, when I talk to a lot of my clients, we talk about it's the ability to do something successfully or efficiently, or it's your knowledge, it's your skill, your behavior. And then in some instances, it could also be your values. So the answer is C. You're probably thinking, wow, well, let's take that not a competency definition and let's just move it a little further. So if we move further and talk about those things, the training, the coaching, the mentoring, the on-the-job learning experiences, I'm sure this is really familiar to quite a few of you guys. So these things, when we look at, say, and I do a lot of looking at usajobs.gov for my clients, but when we look at whether they can do a job, we look at the knowledge. Do they have the knowledge? And how do you get the knowledge? It could be formal training. So it could be a certification like the Grad School USA talked about. It could also be obtaining a degree, which is like sometimes you need that, and especially for, I think, an instructional systems specialist. I was, that at 2 different agencies. So you needed that master's degree. Or if you're an IT specialist, they also want some type of computer science degree. Or any kind of AA degree. But you can also get that knowledge, through reading a book, conducting research, watching videos, which you've seen. There's a lot of YouTube video, a lot of great stuff out there. I think Vital Smarts has some really great stuff. And you can read blogs, and that's a great way to get the education. It's not formal training, but it basically gives you the knowledge. And so also, the formal training, it gives you the psychomotor, the intellectual procedures, the tasks. And so you have the ability to practice and to reinforce what you learned with or without the assistance of a job aid. So we talk about also doing job aids, which I've done for a lot of my clients, because right now it's hard to get people into a class. So let's give them a job aid. And a lot of them are very successful. And then also we can also use the jobs within a training program. So another career and leadership development strategy is coaching and mentoring. So there are both development strategies that will guide you in the approach to doing things. So I know we have some folks in the exhibit hall. I think I know Bernadette very well, and she does a lot of coaching, and she'll probably tell you that coaching, it's not, a lot of times people think coaching is basically telling a person what to do, but coaching is actually using that powerful questioning to guide a person to make decisions. So at one of my agencies, I actually helped to put together the statement of work, or the performance work statements for a coaching contract. And so what we did is we went back to what the actual practice, and the ethics that are required for coaching with the International Coaching Federation, the ICF. So the coach, and also when you look at coaching in terms of, say, I am an inside out coaching person, I look at it in the way that they explain it in their training, where it's something to get you from one point to another point, but it's not really to tell you what to do. It's to give you the tools to ask you questions so that you can actually find out how to get to those areas yourself. Mentoring, on the other hand, is just when they give you advice. You have personal stories or to guide a person. So one could be like top down, one could be like the other way, bottom up, in terms of giving you guidance to help you approach doing something. And also, a lot of times what I suggest is you use the training and the coaching and the mentoring in conjunction with one another to help reinforce what you need to learn. And then the last piece of the leadership and development strategies that we're going to talk about is those on-the-job learning experiences. So abilities. So a lot of times I talk with my clients, they say, oh, this looks like a great job. I know I can, I know that this would be the great job for me. And I'm like, well, it says here that you have to have the ability. Well, I know I can do it though. Abilities are work or career experiences you can do because you've had the opportunity to do them before in a knowledge or a skill-based environment, or through self-taught repetition or innate talent. A couple of years ago, I talked about strengths here at the and strength finders here at the annual institute, and I talked about using your strengths or innate talent. So those are some things as well. But these three things make up, what are career and leadership development strategies to help you carry that competency torch. So what's the best mix? A lot of times when I sat with executive resource boards, there was always a question of, we'll just have, it's a bunch of courses. We'll just put these bunch of courses together. Well, there is an optimal mix. And I'm sure you guys have seen this. Who's seen the 70-20-10 model? You got folks putting stuff in the chat right now for the 70-20-10 model, or if they heard of the 3E.
Yeah, we've got folks smiling, saying yes.
Exactly. Well, I think we need to go back to this. We need to go back. And I think this is the foundation of how we're going to put together our training, our coaching and mentoring, and our on-the-job experiences. So I love Michael Lombardo, Richard Eichinger, and Morgan McCall. They are researchers who in the early 1980s, they developed this model based on research. And so I love the fact that it's based on research. They kept watching what's the best way that people learn? And they came up with these ratios. So, so for instance, if you have a curriculum, which is like 10 different developmental strategies, ideally, only one will be the formal training, like we had discussed, and then maybe 20% would be the coaching and the mentoring, and then the remaining would be the 70% would be the on-the-job or career experiences or details or rotations. So this might vary based upon your organization, based upon some constraints with resources and things such as that. But what you can see here is that at least, you should have twice as many on-the-job experiences as you do the combination of coaching, mentoring, and formal training. And I know that flies in the face of what a lot of folks are doing right now. But I think this opportunity, to lead, in this environment that we're in right now, people need to give them the resources and let them go ahead and work on things themselves, and also give them the ability to be wrong, but to learn from their mistakes, so it's not just like they have to be perfect. And a lot of times in the federal government, there's so much at stake. We think people have to be perfect. But if you give them that opportunity to work on the job, after they've gotten the initial information, and then give them the job aids, give them that performance support, they can be successful. So the 70-20-10 model was further developed by Charles Jennings with the 3E framework. And so same thing, he calls the on-the-job experiences experience or those career experience. And then the coaching and mentoring, he calls exposure. And then of course, the formal training, he calls education. So what does this look like? How do we know? What does this look like in terms of training? So I'm going to count on Cheryl to see the chat. So what I'd like you to do is, for these particular, I have a table set up, and it says for 70 experience, 20 exposure, 10 education. Based upon some of what we've just talked about, and looking at I guess what we could call developmental strategies below in white, what goes under experience, what can be considered exposure or coaching and mentoring, and what could be considered education and training. And I'll give you a few minutes to put it in the chat.
They're chatting. So Joy Watkins says revised policy goes into the 70.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we think manages employee engagement goes? So shadow goes to 20?
Yes. A lot of people don't think about that. Yes.
The design thinking course goes into the 10?
Yep. What else do we have?
See, they didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
There's a lot more. So get everything out of the way. Get ready to type.
Critical skills thinking training goes into the 10. Yes. Manages employee engagement efforts goes into coaching and mentoring.
Okay. So actually, that's interesting that you say manages employee engagement efforts. So I had that at experience, in previous agencies where I've worked at, where we've given some of our senior executive candidates, who've been in these programs, the developmental programs, we've actually given them that assignment to do the employee engagement survey as their capstone or their project. So that actually would be considered experience. Of course, the resilience coaching would be the coaching, and a lot of folks don't realize that, but I hear it's really popular now, and which we really need is we need to learn how to bounce back. And we're going to talk about some of the definition of resilience in a minute. But yes, resilience coaching, and then the shadowing. When you're shadowing, it's not just about watching a person, but what should be done is you should have some types of questionings or some types of things that you want that person to look at as they're shadowing. So it's almost like what we call an advanced organizer. You give them what you want them to take a look at, some key points, some things that you want them to kind of to view and observe and be able to ask questions about. So actually managing the employee engagement efforts, it actually is a task or it's a duty, or a performance. So it could be considered an experience. It could be experience. It could be considered coaching or mentoring if they're working with, say, a senior executive or someone else who might have experience managing the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey or Employee Satisfaction Survey. Questions about that? All right, so now that we've kind of had a chance to take a look at that, let's take a look at the leading change competency. Wow, my got some my lawn care people have come, so hopefully you don't hear them in the background. So how do we make this practical? How do we use this when looking at career and developmental strategies? So a little over a year ago, before pre-COVID, I started looking at how can we map the ACQs to career and leadership development strategies. And so I took leading change, which is the first one, which is always the most difficult when I'm working with my clients to figure out how to demonstrate it in a CCAR or a STAR type of written format. And so what I said, well, let's take a look at just change management. And so the Association of Change Management Professionals, I looked at their definition, and some of the key stuff in here is it's a structured approach. It's transitioning an organization from a current state to a future state. Then I looked at who are the thought leaders in change, like maybe change leadership or leading change, but I found change leadership and John Kotter. Anybody heard of them? Anyone heard of John Kotter? Just put a smiley face in the chat. Got some smiley faces in the chat. He's great. He is actually one of the thought leaders in change leadership. He's written so many books, and he's actually kind of coined the term change leadership. So what he talks about is that it's still a transformation. It's still some type of transition, but there's driving forces, there's visions, there's processes. And he talks about change leadership is they're putting an engine, they're moving it forward, they're making it the transition go faster, smarter, more efficiently. So it's usually associated with large scale changes. Then I took a look at change leadership from another thought leader, and this is Richard Hawkes. And I like his definition because he talks about it's the art and then it's the science. That's so great, because when people talk about theory or practical, it's like it's the art and science. So it's abstract, it's being creative, but then it's also there should be some type of processes. And yes, most definitely. But he also, what I like about him is he's influencing people. So you have the driving forces from John Kotter, but from Richard Hawkes, you have influencing people to engage in change. But you're still going from a current state to a desired future state. And then I looked at the federal government's definition, well, actually of the core qualification of leading change. So I looked at that and I saw it's bringing about strategic change. You're still concerned about the organizational goals, because these agencies, our federal agencies still have, we still have to perform. We still have to, provide. We have constituents. We have folks that we need, services that are really needed. So we still have to meet those organizational goals. But we're establishing an organizational vision. The vision can change. The goals don't usually change. The vision can kind of change, or how you get to those goals. But it's implementing it in a constantly changing environment. And isn't that what we're in right now? Aren't we in a constantly changing environment? So what are some things that you see that's very similar about these definitions? And you can just put it in the chat real quick. What are some things that you see that's very similar about these definitions? I'm just going to grab.
So we have folks typing. So Joy says vision.
Yeah. Yeah, the vision. Oh my gosh, yes. And so you want to have something that that you're going to go to. What else do we have?
I'm seeing change. Joy says each one has some reference to vision or future, forward looking.
Yes. Sometimes we don't know what the vision is, but it's just like you have to have some idea of it, and you're moving it forward. Anything else, Cheryl?
Not right now.
Okay. I think a lot of it, what we're looking here is, I I like the, I do believe in change management. I do believe in the term. I do believe it's a wonderful field, change management, and it should never change. Actually, with the Association for Talent Development and their new capability model, it is actually one of the pieces of their capability model. But I think right now what we're looking for in terms of career and developmental strategies is we're looking at leading change. And why are we looking at leading change? Because instead of managing change, have we been managing change, or we've been actually adapting to change? The big difference. So because everything has been so different over the last year, we can't really use those same narrow processes and models to get from the current to the desired. We need to facilitate change rather than to manage change. So there's a difference between controlling or change management and encouraging and encouraging folks to learn to do things in an environment where change is happening, to adapt to that change. So let's do another poll question. And so in the next poll question, we talk about which of the following competencies do you think are most closely aligned with the definition of leading change? So some folks probably already know this based upon their experience in the federal government.
Yes, I can tell you based on your comments and everything about COVID, COVID's about adapting and flexibility. Anne says she's been adapting to change to the new normal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I said select all that apply. So what are some of anything else, in terms of the following competencies do you think are most closely aligned with the definition of leading change?
So somebody sent in a Q&A that says all of the above. And so has Joy. Joy says all of the above. Jeff says creativity and innovation, external awareness, vision. Anne says all of the above.
Okay, so there's probably some folks that that already know what's that are already familiar. So actually, according to the federal definition of leading change, it is all of the above. So I like the federal definition because it mentions meeting organizational goals and using these, what we call non-technical leading change competencies to facilitate change. So a lot of times people say, oh, it's leading change, and they're kind of ambiguous about, okay, what exactly what it needs to look like or what you need to use. You need to use all of this if you're going to lead change. So this is lighting the flame before you can actually carry that competency torch. So let's take a look real quick at the definition of leading change competencies. So let's say creativity. We want folks to be creativity with leading change. And have we had to be creative and innovative over the last year? We've had to question those conventional approaches. We've had to design new and cutting edge programs. We've had to do new insights. So we've had to, and that's a part of leading change. Another is the external awareness. What's going on outside? We are not a silo. We're not in a box. We've got to understand what's going on, not just locally, not less nationally, but internationally. There's policies and there's trends that are affecting the organization and shaping the stakeholders' views. We have to be aware of the organization's impact on the external environment. And I think a good example of this is the fact that President Biden went ahead and was it AstraZeneca, made some doses of that available for other countries or other nations rather. So being aware of things, because it's not just about us. There are things that are going to affect how we are able to thrive, not just survive. Flexibility. So I've got to be open to new information. I've got to rapidly adapt to new information. I got to change. There's some unexpected obstacles. So we got to figure out how we can move. I can't stay in one place. The resilience, and I talked about resilience coaching. So this talks about how can I deal, effectively with pressure? How can I remain optimistic? How can I recover quickly from setbacks? And then strategic thinking, which is like the objectives, the priorities. This is a lot of times where people where I see a lot of managers and leaders have a lot of issues. It's not just the strategic plan, the 2 or 5 year strategic plan that an agency has, but this is like really thinking about how are you going to take those goals, take those objectives, those priorities, and implement plans to get to those in a global environment. How are you going to manage the risk? And then vision. So that's the long-term view. It's that shared vision. That's huge. How are we going to act as a catalyst for organizational change? How are we influencing others? Just like Richard Hawks had talked about, how are we influencing others? This is all in the OPM Senior Executive EQ1, ECQ1 Leading Change definition. Very important. So you guys have the handout on your, you guys have a handout on your, at the bottom of the panel that actually has these definitions. So if you can just pull it out, and we're going to do some exercises real quick. Yeah, I'm not going to just lecture. I'm going to have you do a little work. So how do these career and developmental strategies look in terms of leading change? So we have the competencies for leading change, right? So here are some career and leadership development strategies. Talk to me, or put in the chat rather, which of the competencies do you think these developmental strategies that are listed, the balanced scorecard, all the way down to maintaining and sustaining a culture of innovation? You could just throw whatever in the chat to see like what competency can help, or what competency would help, or would you gain by taking one of these developmental strategies. Let's see what's in the chat. So I'll just say like design thinking. Where does that go? What is that helping you do? And I think there was someone who was talking about design thinking earlier this week. The budget process, what does that help you do?
So I want to remind folks, if you're trying to find the handout, you just scroll down, and under the session description, you'll see the handout that you can download, but you are completely welcome to just type your answers in the chat or the Q&A so I can share them with Adele.
It's a live session, so we're looking to get some feedback. So do we see anything yet?
So Joy says balanced scorecard is strategic thinking.
Okay. Yeah. It could also be vision, because we're also looking at when we look at vision, we're taking that, we're looking at, building a long-term view. But yeah, most definitely. What else are we looking at?
Design thinking will be helpful when considering how we would conduct hybrid training back in the classroom and virtually. Building culture, vision, you are building. Budget process, leading change.
All right. So what I see here is when we're looking at design thinking, that's going to help us. Any kind of design thinking is going to help us, and in terms of a design thinking course or an exercise, is going to help us in terms of our creativity and our innovation. It's going to help us build that creativity, that innovation.
I'll tell you, you're absolutely right, because I actually took the design thinking program at MIT, and it also involves a little bit of vision.
Yes. Yeah. So you've got 2 in 1, right? You take 2 courses, and you've already addressed 2 of the competencies, non-technical competencies for leading change.
Actually, you could say flexibility and resilience, because it's all about prototyping.
Yes, most definitely. Anything else? I think building a culture of engagement, the virtual training, maybe resilience, because you want people to figure out how to bounce back, how to deal effectively with pressure. You want them to remain optimistic. The strategic planning, of course, strategic thinking. The resilience, of course, the critical thinking skills, flexibility. You want folks to be flexible. Anything else that we're seeing in the chat?
Yeah, Joy says strategic planning covers all.
Yes, yes, exactly. Creativity, external awareness, flexibility, all these different competencies you could address with a strategic planning course and a budget course. I look at that, say maybe external awareness. What's Congress doing? You know, what's going on with some of these other agencies? You know, and then maintaining and sustaining a culture of innovation. It's definitely, you know, you would to take that particular course or training to help you with creativity and innovation. So we're not done yet. These are exposure or coaching and mentoring type of developmental strategies. Which of these developmental and mentoring, which of these developmental strategies for career or leadership could you use, the ones that are in the bullets, to address either creativity and innovation or external awareness or flexibility or resilience or strategic thinking or vision? Which of some of the developmental strategies listed by the bullet points?
So Shark Tank, Joy says, is creativity.
Yes, yes. I think that's a great idea.
And vision.
Mm-hmm. What a I like the employee satisfaction results, the focus group action planning for vision, creating that shared vision.
Mm-hmm. Informational interviews, external awareness.
Yes, yes, exactly. Anybody know what agile methodology coaching? It took me a while to kind of understand. It's basically using all these different tools to address what you need and to get a project done.
So I am, and I would say that's creativity and innovation, flexibility, and resilience. Yes. Actually, all the above.
You see how just one developmental strategy can address so many of these types of competencies to lead change. So you really don't need like seven different things, or a large curriculum. You just need to make sure that they're addressing each of these things. The upward mentoring of high school students, I talked about resilience.
Yeah, Jerry says all of the above for that one.
Yep. Emotional intelligence, maybe the resilience. The benchmarking with other organizations' telework programs, maybe the external awareness. Okay, so let's move on. Last one. These are experiential or career types of, assignments, or could be a rotation or a detail, tiger team. So these are things that we would like to make sure that folks, this is how we get folks to do stuff. So when we get them to do stuff so that they can achieve the competencies of creativity and innovation, external awareness, flexibility, resilience, strategic thinking, and vision. So what do we have here? So you can go ahead and just type it real quick. I know I'm asking you guys to do a lot of typing. So what do we got? Do you have anything in our chat yet? I know it's a lot to think about.
Not yet.
Okay, well, I'll give you, so the risk management metrics and system, that kind of aligns with vision. When we look at the definition of vision, it's about looking, or as well as strategic thinking. It's how do we manage risk?
Yeah, so Joyce says risk management, resilience, and strategic thinking. And I would say that goes with the shelter in place drill.
Yes. Resilient, most definitely. Executive loan program, we're facilitating it. So we're facilitating, we're facilitating, we're going to those local colleges, we're figuring out what their needs are based upon what we have and what we've already done an organizational assessment to figure what our needs are. And we're actually facilitating that. We're making it happen. So what competency are we building there? If we give someone that type of assignment.
Someone says external awareness. And then we have Jeff saying innovation awards are innovation and creativity. Aids the organization-wide green paperless initiative, strategic thinking and vision. And I'm going to throw another one in there, Jerry, external awareness.
Exactly. I think that, the paperless, definitely external awareness, but there's so many. So my thing is, you can address so many of your developmental milestones by just doing one or two of these. You don't have to like come up with a whole list. I think that's great. So, wow, you're thinking, okay, I can sit back now. I don't have to type as much. No, you do. So how do we apply this? How do we apply this? So this is a scenario. It was just funny because I think I am working on a contract as a federal consultant for a agency that's been in the news lately. And I had a, I did the call center. and there were some things going on in the background. So I just came up with this application scenario based upon my experience. So a manager is tasked with teaching his team leaders. So a manager, he has to teach his team leaders so to lead change for call center employees by streamlining their response procedures, but they still got to meet these organizational effectiveness goals. It is also in an increased telework environment. So, wow. So that's a lot to think about, right? But that's a lot of times that's what we're called upon to do as federal training officers. We're called upon to help these managers, to help them help their staff. So when I create curriculums, when I create I look at all these different developmental strategies. And when I look at the developmental strategies, the first thing I do is, instead of just saying, okay, have them do this, is I actually pick out a competency that I want them to be able to address. And so, and the competency, it could come from the performance management system. It could also, come from, say, it could be the federal competency program. It could come from the agency's competency, which should be mapped to the ECQs. So because of the limited space here on the screen, I just said, well, pick 3 different competencies that you feel we should use as to lead, or we should map some of these developmental strategies to. Then there's also performance standards. What do we really want them to do at the end? What does success look like after they've done these developmental strategies? So this is kind of like, this is a do type of thing. So I know it's a lot. And for those who pulled down the slides, you probably already know the answer. But what are some of the leading change competencies that you think would be relevant in this type of scenario? And you could put it in the chat.
So Adele, just to be conscious of time, you have about 8 minutes left.
Yeah.
So somebody says leading a new Lean Six Sigma process, strategic planning. I think they're back on the last slide. So do you just want to go ahead and run through the answers for us?
Sure, we can do that. I think in the videotape I had to just run through it. So here's some stuff that we're thinking about. So creativity and innovation, because we want them, they're streamlining the process. So they got to be creative. That's a leading change competency I think is appropriate. Resilience, because these are folks, they're getting calls from all over the nation, sometimes all over, and in some instances it might be all over the world. So they've got to be able to bounce back and deal with pressure. And then the strategic thinking, because they still have to meet the organizational goals. So here's how I've kind of lined it up. You can line up any way, but just to give you an idea, to get to that, get them thinking about creativity for the team leaders, to get them thinking about creativity, to get them to get their employees thinking about creativity. Maybe, like I said, let's do a design thinking course or exercise. And then, also maybe a Shark Tank theme program. So maybe asking the team leaders to come up with, how they feel they could streamline the processes, make it like a Shark Tank thing. Okay. And maybe they can actually involve their call center employees, and they'll be standing, there'll be a group of folks sitting there wondering like, okay, how are we going to, should we give them money, to get this done? And then the experience is like, then having them, once they decide on what they do, let's do a social media campaign, internally for the new processes, once we've decided to do it. And so the way that we know that it's successful is that the team leader is implementing that new process. Another competency is resilience. So we want them to demonstrate resilience when they're looking at streamlining these processes to meet organizational goals. So critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence, because we want them to start thinking about what are the customers thinking about, you know, what are our coworkers thinking about, and then we also want them to lead the unit reorganization. So the thing is, when these processes, when we streamline them, we might need to reorganize the organization. So that's something to think about, and so that we can respond to increased telework support. And then another thing is strategic thinking, again, because you've got to meet those organizational goals. And so how do we learn about strategic thinking? Maybe with the strategic planning course, shadowing some senior officials, doing the Lean Six Sigma, like someone said, so that we can meet those organizational goals. And so I know it's a lot. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat and I'll answer them as they come up. So the thing is, those are a way to light the flame, to light that torch. But how do we carry the competency torch? We got to make sure that we do it in the organization. We got to tie it to the organizational mission, the visions, and the goals. We got to make sure that those developmental strategies are things that are being done that's going to lead to success in the organization, something that the organization is already going to do. Let's give it to somebody to do as a developmental type of a strategy to get them to where they need to go as a leader or in their career. Also, yesterday for the Grad School USA, they talked about data. We need to start collecting more data. How are they performing? How's the organization doing prior to this type of developmental strategy being used, or experiential, just developmental strategy, whether it's action learning, whether it's just a tiger team, and then what's going on afterward? You know, are things being improved? Are they being slowed down? You know, it's always help. And also track the demographic data. You know, who's being affected by this? You know, and so what's really helpful is you can use empirical data. You can use and have them do the studies, the white papers, the research, the internal surveys to basically support these developmental strategies. And then, of course, I always like, we're going from a current state to a desired state. So use a business case to get your point through, to get your point made. Some other things to talk about is here's some leading change resources. Again, you know, there's a link to this in the handouts. The last one I'm going to do, I put crucial conversations. I know the Vital Smarts people talked yesterday about habits, but the whole thing of, these are things, a lot of the things that are being done, there's going to be a lot of emotion, there's going to be different viewpoints, and there's going to be a lot of stakes. So we need to know how to have those crucial conversations. And then John Maxwell, I love the 360-degree leader. He has a lot of strategies. And then the CCL, they did the FYI, which has a ton of developmental strategies. It's not mapped to the ECQs though. So that's what I've done in my area in terms of the book that I wrote, our workbook that I wrote, Competencies That Catapult Career, 100 Strategies to Lead Change, is I went ahead and I mapped all of the 100 developmental strategies, whether it's education, whether it's coaching and mentoring, whether it's experiential types of, to the competencies for leading change. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Oh, there we go. To kind of show you what's in the book. In the book, what you see here is, you know, I've done some introduction. Oh, stuff coming up. Yeah, here we go. So there's the introduction. I know this is looking kind of fast on your screen. Whoop. I'll just go to the contents, table contents. So there's an introduction to, you know, about, you know, where we define leading change. Then we do an assessments. There are also, there's reflection, brainstorming activities. There's an expanded list, you know, that's organized to the optimal learning 70-20-10. There's leading change resources that you see here in the appendix, as well as there's networking tips, because sometimes you may not be part of a formal developmental program, but you want to obtain those competencies, obtain those knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to have the competency. So, you know, you can actually network on your own to obtain those competencies. And then, of course, forms to document the fact that you've led the change, you have the goals, you know, that your goals, that you're attaining them, and any kind of planning that you want to do. And that is it. We have some questions.
Actually, the folks are gonna be dropping off any moment now, but I want to remind everybody that you can connect with Adele through the speaker section, and the recording of this session will be posted within a week. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And yeah, please connect with me through LinkedIn.